All right, so in this one, we are going to introduce a new way to actually get these user answers and update our algorithm so it's a little bit more efficient than it currently is. Right now, we're iterating twice through two sets of query sets, which this is grossly inefficient, and especially if you had a lot of user answers. Instead, what we want to do is iterate through the questions that they have in common, or at least questions that are close to being in common and going through there. So we've already done that. Like we already actually make sure that these questions are the same, and we just want to make it a little bit more efficient. And we do this by using a concept called Q objects or Q lookup. So this is a complex lookup using Q objects. So I'm going to show you how to use this so you can have an idea of how it works and then how we can actually apply it to our actual project. So let's go into the terminal. I want to do a few imports here. The first thing I'm going to do is from matches.models import match, and then from questions.models import question, and then finally from we're going to be importing the Q here. So from django.db.models import Q. So this Q lookup. So we have to do a few sets, and first of all, I'm going to set the m. So m for matches.objects.all, and I'm just going to get that first match. And then I'm going to set the user. The first user is going to be m.user_a. Second user is going to be m.user_b. So m, a, and b. That's what we get. And then questions, we have question.objects.all. So these are all the questions. So this is stuff we've already seen before. Now what Q objects do is it allows us to do something just subtly different than what we've done before. And if we take a look at the question model itself, so let's go and look in the question model, we see that we're not associated, the question model itself is not associated to anything in particular. However, it is reversely associated to answer as well as user answer. So it has a foreign key relation to these other models. So that means we can use these other models and we can use it in a fashion that uses Q lookups. So that's kind of what you see here. So we've got question __ starts with. Now this is not what we're going to be working off of, so let's actually go back into our own project and work off of that. So this first Q, I want to get the questions that are associated to the answers that any particular user has. So this user answer, right? And this user answer is related to these questions. So I'm going to say user answer __ user equals to a, and this gives me this query, right? It doesn't actually query anything, but it gives me this query. So I can actually do question.objects.filter and then use this query, Q, and parentheses around it. Then inside here, I can do user answer _ user equals to a. And it actually gives me the questions that are related to the user and the user answer together. So these are the questions that user A has actually answered. So if I change that to user B, these are the questions user B have actually answered, which is really convenient for us because that means now that I have saved in the database that these questions. Now, these questions are the same, so there's a couple ways on how we can combine these two query sets. So I'll just say, first off, I'll say Q1 is equal to this first call, and then I'll say Q2 is equal to the second call, this one down here. So now it's just the same one, I just set it into variables, so Q1 and Q2. So to combine these, we can actually do Q1 with this slash, the up and down slash, Q2, and that actually combines them into one query set. And that also means that we can have query set methods here. So I can say the count, and then I can even filter it even more if I wanted to. So it is actually a query set. But I can also use this method called distinct. So what that does is it removes any repetitive instances in here, which is really, really useful for us in this case. But that doesn't mean that it's comparing the two, right? It doesn't mean that user A and user B have these same questions in common. All it means is that these are the distinct instances of these questions. For example, if user B actually answered one additional question than user A, there would be one more question here where it's not actually going to line up with user A's number of questions, which this is okay. So just keep in mind right here what we've done is we were able to actually get the questions that they have in common plus a little bit more, plus some that they don't have in common. But this is okay. We're not getting all of the questions that they answered. We were just more or less answering the ones that they have in common and plus a few others. Because the plus a few others, it might end up being a lot others, but that's okay because we'll actually worry about that once we go through it in our actual call. So now that we have this, let's kind of update our actual model for all this stuff. So, or the algorithm. And I'm going to make a new algorithm. So it said get points to, and I'll say user A and user B. Get points to will eventually be get points, and we'll just have one algorithm here, but we're gonna work with both at this time. All right, so first off, we're gonna go back into the shell and see how we did all this. I'm just gonna scroll up and look at what I did. All right, so I imported a few things. So let's go ahead and import question on user answer, and I'm also going to import Q. So from Django.db.models, import Q. And then we have A and B, we already have those users. And then now if we scroll down a little bit, we had the question A. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this specifically and paste this in here. So I'll just say Q1 is equal to that. And then we'll say Q2 is equal to the other one, so B. And then I'll just say question set 1. I know it's slightly separate from these, but I'm just setting them so we can take a look at them line by line. And this is going to be question.objects.filter Q1. And then question set 2 equals to question.objects.filter Q2. Okay, so that's where we're at with this. Right, and then we have this combining function, so we can actually combine them. So we'll just say question set final is equal to the combination of these. So question set 1 and question set 2. And then we want to do distinct to make sure that our query set is not having multiple or duplicates, right? So if we did it just without distinct, it'll have duplicates because it's combining those two query sets, right? Okay, cool. So now that we have this, we have a list of possible questions that we can go through. So this doesn't mean that they're matched questions. That just means that they're possible questions that they both have answered. So the next thing I want to do is actually refactor this a little bit because we don't actually have to do all three of these steps right here. What we really could do is just say question set is equal to question.objects.filter, and it's going to be Q1 or Q2 dot distinct. And this question set actually just overrode all this. So I'm going to get rid of all that. So now we have this question set in here. So what this means is we have the number of questions that are related, right? They're somewhat related. In some cases, it's going to be more questions than we actually need, but that's okay. Instead of doing a bunch of questions and answers, like what we did down here, we did two sets of answers that may have the same questions or may not, but that's not really the point. And here we just definitely have all of the same questions and then some. So now what we would do here is we'd iterate through these questions. So for question, or I'm going to say Q in questions, that might actually get confusing. So I'll say for question in question set. This is where we'll actually iterate through all of these questions and get the match answers based on them. So first off, I'll just say A answers. So A answer equals to user answer dot objects dot get, and now we'll say user equals to user A, and question is equal to question. Of course, the current iteration for that question. And then we'll say except A answer equals to none. And then we'll try another one. We'll try B answer, so it's actually going to be the same thing, so I'll just copy it. Except a different user is all. And we'll change these all to B everywhere you see A in this block. So now that we have this, we'll say if A answer and B answer. So if they're not none, basically, then we'll run this block. So print something, like we'll do something here. I'm not going to do that yet because we want to kind of leave this off on just Q lookups in this case. So what we've done here is a nice query for the user answers, that actual model. So we're getting all of the questions that are related, and then we check whether or not that they have answers to that question, right? Because in some cases you might have too many questions in this query set. That's okay, because our block here is checking whether or not those questions actually exist for that particular user. Now this is more efficient than running through 2 iterations or 2 loops of questions or answers, either one. It's more efficient doing it this way because it's based off of the questions that are being asked versus the amount of answers that have been answered, which is subtly different, but it is overall better. So what we have to do in this block is similar to what we have to do here, but that's something that we'll do in the next one. So if you have any questions on Q lookups, let us know. I definitely recommend that you check out the documentation and kind of read up on it, because there's other ways you can do Q lookups. Something that's really nice about this is you can actually do these lookups for searches too. So like if you had a search function of some kind, you can use this Q lookup for searches, and that's where it says this starts with, and there's all sorts of things that you can use, publish date, all sorts of things you can use in these Q lookups to actually find specific queries or a specific instance, which is cool. All right, so if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.